Okay, so we're live now. Hi, everybody. It's Michelle, Lone Star Left. I have three fantastic candidates with me today. They're all going to tell you a little bit more about who they are, and we're going to talk about some serious issues that are going on. I would like to start first with Cassandra. Cassandra Hernandez. She's running for House District 115, which is in Dallas. It is a blue district. Julie Johnson used to hold the district. She's retiring now, or she's running for Congress. Cass is doing really good. And why don't you just tell us a little bit more about you, Cass?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, again for allowing me to share space with all of you. I am running here in the northwest area of Dallas County, and just like Michelle was saying, that's Representative Julie Johnson's seat. She is running for Congress, so her seat has opened up. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for over a decade now. I practice in immigration as well as civil law. In addition to that, I also used to sit on the City of Dallas Ethics Commission, which I had to give up that position in order to run for office, but was something that I love. But more than anything, I'm a community advocate. I'm just somebody who over the decade have been working in the community, supporting Democrats up and down the ballot, doing a lot of charitable type and being part of charitable organizations, but more importantly, just showing up for our people. So
Okay,
thank you for
perfect.
having me.
Absolutely. And then we also have Teresa, and you're going to have to say your last name because otherwise I'm going to mess it up. Go ahead, Teresa.
It's Teresa Boisseau. If you were to spell it phonetically, it's Bwasew, Boisseau. Thanks for having me, Michelle. Many people ask me why I am running, and the short answer is always my daughter. The longer answer is to build a brighter future for Texas, and I believe it can be done. I am a former teacher. I have worked in tech and currently family business owner. I'm a realtor and own a group with my co-owner with my brother. I have interest in seeing change in education as a former teacher. I believe education is super important, and the attacks on it right now are not needed. Of course, we need to support teachers, support schools, and they are the backbone of some of the communities that I am wanting to represent. Also, I see we are going to talk about the weather. This is one of the reasons that I really started getting super active. I was already active in the community, but in the 3 years ago, in February 2021, my daughter was home from college due to COVID, and she was here when the storm happened. So we were off and on with electricity and water. And at the end, we were sitting in our living room decompressing, and I looked over at her, and she had a kind of a strained look on her face. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said, "What's the point? The world is a mess," at 19 years old. So I got real active, even more than I was. I did the march from Georgetown to Austin on voting rights. I testified to the House Committee on voting on the voting bill. Unfortunately, they did pass it. I helped run a statewide campaign, and then last year I did pro bono work. I was the campaign manager for a school board member here in Round Rock, and we were able to defeat the Moms for Liberty. Even though they were super well funded, we used our community to defeat them. So I had actually thought about running in 2021 and made the choice not to. And then this year I thought it's time. I'm pretty much done with seeing how things are going, and I could not sit on the sidelines anymore. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, great. And last but certainly not least, a familiar face, Alex Dominguez. He is running for House District 37, which is on the border. It is accidentally kind of currently being held by a Republican, but that's not gonna last long. So Alex, go ahead.
Well, I tell you what, I take complete responsibility for that. After redistricting, I was zoned out of House District 37, which I held as a turned out at the same time Senator Lucio was already thinking about and then it subsequently announced his retirement. I thought it would be a great opportunity, not just to pick up where he left off, but honestly change a few of the policies that he had pushed that I disagree with, both as a Democrat and as a general human being. You know, I believe strongly in the right to people having ownership of their own bodies, whether they're male, female, or NB, or whatever else we may come up with in the future. And I don't think that the state government should have any say so, whereas Senator Lucio certainly thought differently. So I jumped in that race, much to my, I guess I became humbled. I did not get the nomination in that race, a very tight race, very well funded. And then I thought really completely believed that the Democratic nominee was going to take over my seat and continue the work that we had done. And I was horrified when Janie Lopez won. I reached out to her several times before she took office, and we have a very friendly relationship. I gave her advice on some good bills that would help South Texas, and she didn't do anything with them, and then became a crony of Governor Abbott. Not even Speaker, Governor Abbott. We have got to switch that seat. It never should have. I think this is the first time in history that it's ever been anything but a Democratic held seat. So I'm going to make sure that we take that one back.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you back on the House floor. So let's start with the border. And I think that we kind of have to talk about it, you know, because what Abbott has been doing, and if you guys read my blog, I've been talking about it a lot. He has essentially, like right now, he's blocking Border Patrol from doing their job, which has caused drownings. It's caused chaos. It should be in Congress, and Teresa, I'm going to ask you about that, but I think, Alex, since you are on the border, since you live in a border community, can you tell us, you know, your perspective of what's going on there and what we need to do to fix it?
Well, I'll tell you what, there is a legitimate concern by Texans. And as far as they know, they get their news sometimes from the internet, which isn't always the most accurate. But if they are to be believed, thousands of people cross the border every day, primarily in the Del Rio area, somewhat in our area as well, but not as much as it is in Del Rio. To their concerns, I'm not going to say that it's not an illegitimate concern and something that we should be having a discussion about as a nation. And I believe that something is being worked on right now in Congress, where even the Speaker of the House there realizes from Senate colleagues, he has to reach some type of compromise now. That being said, what Governor Abbott is doing is ridiculous. You know, first he was setting in the under Operation Lone Star, spending millions of dollars that had originally been earmarked for other programs, other facilities. I sat on House Appropriations, and we called them before us in the committee and said, "Why are you spending this much money that we had designated to help juveniles or the prison systems?" And he said, "Well, it was an emergency." And we told him, "You need to ask if this is what you want to spend the money on. You can't just take it from another body." That was first. Second, I was in contact with a number of our servicemen that work in the Texas National Guard who were telling me of the horrible conditions under which they were living. Some didn't have uniforms. Many never received their paychecks. Several committed suicide. They had no end date to their assignment. They didn't know how long they were going to be there. They were away from their families. They were losing their jobs. This was Governor Abbott's doing because he had no plan. Since then, it's only gotten worse. Now they've locked out the National Guard from a common area park that the community has. They're not letting Border Patrol process people. And these are people that have legitimate claims for asylum. This is the governor, I guess, applying for a cabinet position, assuming Trump or some other Republican wins. But in any case, it's the wrong decision. It's anti-human, in my opinion. And it's a wrong thing to do at this time, especially in this bitter cold, where he keeps shipping people off to places like Chicago without the proper protection.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you on that. And it is utter chaos. Cassandra is actually an immigration attorney. So I would love to get your perspective, Cass, just, you know, about the process and about maybe how Abbott and the Republicans in Texas have kind of hurt that process.
Sure. I would say first and foremost, I really appreciate having the opportunity to hear what Alex has to say, because I think one of the things that we forget to do is to make sure that the people who are actually there and seeing it firsthand are the ones that are in the forefront and educating us on what's happening on the ground. It's so easy for us all over the state and all over the nation to talk about what's going on at the border, but it's really the communities that are there that should be the forefront of talking about what exactly is happening there. As far as the immigration process and just what's going on the border in general, I will say, the fact of that there is a need, and that's understood even from Democrats on the national level. We saw Biden reach out to and ask from Congress for over, 14 billion. He asked specifically to help with the administrative stuff that would help alleviate some of the issues that we're seeing at the border. And we saw that Republicans denied that. And that's because we know that in particular, they're not able to continue to keep pushing that narrative and yelling that Democrats aren't addressing this issue and ignoring the issue if it's being addressed. And so, we saw here in the state of Texas just recently, I know I saw, Michelle, that you had posted about it, that literally we had children this summer who ended up the state of Texas as far as feeding 3.7 million children.
Yeah.
This summer, it's a showing of where our priorities are aligned. And so what we're seeing at the border is just like Alex was saying, the politicizing of the hurt of people. We know that predominantly majority of these people who are coming over, these undocumented individuals, are people who are fleeing violence and persecution. And this is a nation that has been welcoming and a nation of immigrants. And so understanding that that is part of our moral fiber, and that there is a way that we can deal with these issues that need to be dealt with both on the national as well as the state level. I think one of the biggest issues that we honestly have is that there is no coordination and discussions going on between the state and the national level. We know that immigration is a federal issue. Immigration reform needs to happen. And we know that that needs to happen on the national level. But in the meantime, Texas is bearing the brunt of, as far as the financial burden of what's happening at the border. And so we need to make sure that the state of Texas is receiving the funding that they need in order to be able to properly process individuals who have the rights to asylum and refugee application process. And as somebody who has gone before and been in front of immigration courts before, I can tell you, we don't have enough judges. We don't have enough administrative staff, not only in the court system, but also at the border, in order to fully process them as we need to be able to do pursuant to law. And so, making sure that people understand that the issue at the border is a lot more complex than we realize. Also somebody who has been doing, for quite some time, citizenship workshops and asylum refugee cases through Catholic Charities in the city. We have the resources, not only here in the state of Texas, but all over the country, really. And so that's why it's important that Governor Abbott stop politicizing the hurt of people coming over who are fleeing persecution and violence, and actually coordinating with making sure we process them properly and get them to nonprofits and organizations that are equipped to be able to take them. Because like I said, I've shown up for and supported and helped in efforts with nonprofits here in the Dallas County area. I know that there's some all over the state of Texas. I used to live in Houston and also did it through Catholic Charities in Houston. And I know that there are some all over the US. We just got to make sure that the people, the leaders, are acting like leaders and coordinating with each other to make sure that, like I said, we are not politicizing the hurt of people who legitimately, are just trying to find a better life for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So Teresa, you are the one that would actually be headed for Congress. And, kind of like what Cass said, that it is up to Congress to pass, immigration reform and border security. What do you think needs to be done, from the federal level to fix the situation. And I think that part of the situation may include mass migration. I don't want to make it too complex for everybody, but what do you think, Teresa, needs to be done?
Yes, I'm going to carry on with what Cassandra and Alex were saying. There are people who are using the challenges of immigration for political stunts. And if you're putting barbed wire at the border, sorry, you aren't really coming up with solutions that actually work for problems that actually exist. And if we stop and really analyze the challenges at the border, they include a broken visa system and a broken asylum processing system, and the challenges they are facing in their home countries. We can address several of these issues by modernizing the border rather than militarizing it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that the incumbent did was tie immigration to fentanyl. And it is not coming in the way Republicans portray it, because over 90% is coming in through legal checkpoints. What that tells me is that we need to give our border the tools that it needs to be able to find the fentanyl. Before I move to the next point, I believe we need to have a comprehensive and frank conversation about painkiller use in the United States. Opioid addiction has decimated communities across the country, and it can also be linked to rampant access to prescription drugs, which is further increasing the demand for fentanyl. We have to make sure not to be distracted by lobbying of pharmaceutical companies, which is about blaming immigrants for problems they themselves have created.
Yeah.
We should do what we did with big tobacco. When we uncovered and proved the use of nicotine and its impact, there was a societal change around tobacco use, and we need to do the same thing with opioids.
Yeah.
The other thing is to address the brokenness of the visa and asylum seeker process. As Cassandra and Alex know, to even get to the United States, you have to seek asylum in the countries that you're coming from, and it's nearly impossible to complete. The way that system is set up, you have to stop in every country, and when you get to northern Mexico, you need to navigate the CPB One app, which is just a thought about that is not everybody has access to a phone and an app to do that. This current requirement goes against the established protocol of immediate asylum for those threatened in their own country. Also, when you log on and request an appointment, it's been widely reported that there often aren't any appointments available, or if there are, they're months out. Getting a visa to enter the United States with the intent of living here isn't any easier than the asylum process. In order to relieve pressure on either process, we have to solve the combined problem they both faced. In my opinion, a lot of that has to do with access to better tools so that we could revolutionize the visa system and the asylum system. In Congress, we need to have serious discussions about the process of becoming an American, and not through the same old discussion of messing with the numbers or quotas, but including the lens and lived experience of those who've been through this process. Without a clear process in place, immigrants end up being abused in some cases, which we've seen on numerous news stories. When the US spells out and follows a clear process, we give immigrants the ability to become community members, allow them to earn living wages and feed their families, and allow them to be taxpayers and stimulate our economy.
Okay.
We have the tools, and we have some of the tools, and some of those tools need to be modernized for today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And just one point I want to add to that, the Cato Institute released a study that found that, like, I can't say the exact number, you guys might have to Google it, but it's like 87% or 83% of people caught carrying fentanyl into America were actually American citizens. So it's not even, migrants that are bringing this drug into our country.
I was going to say, Michelle, if I could add as well, as somebody who practices in immigration, I can tell you our immigration system is incredibly complex. So whenever I encounter folks who say, and very often it's even folks who went through the immigration process or seem to be the hardest on people who are seeking asylum and refugee status. You know, the idea of, well, you know, they got to do it the right way. The right way, just like Teresa was saying, is broken.
Yeah.
I tell people very often, I would love to see the day where I no longer have to practice an immigration law, because it's so easy for people to be able to apply and go through the system without the need of legal representation. So I think that's also understanding that, you know, all of these things have to be done in conjunction and hand in hand with each other if we truly want to address, you know, as far as any particular issues that we're having dealing with immigration and with the border.
Yes.
Okay. So the immigration conversation is far from over. It's an ongoing situation. As of right now, Abbott has till the end of today to stand the National Guard down and let Border Patrol back in. We'll see what happens with that. I want to switch gears a little bit. This week was really cold. I'm still frozen. A lot of people are still frozen. I think some schools are still closed in Texas in different parts. It's only January, and I think that last time we saw a freeze like this, it was in February, so we still could see another hard freeze. Luckily, I think the grid held up, but we had a lot of grid problems last summer. I mean, we've seen a lot of problems with our grid, you know, and this is not going to get any better as climate change gets worse. And I think that we're at in kind of an injunction where we have to do more. And I'm sure that everybody on this call agrees with me. So let's start with Cass this time. What do you think, you know, from going into the House, from Texas being the biggest oil producer in probably the world, what does Texas have to do to mitigate climate change, which will cut back on some of the extreme weather that we're seeing?
Sure. So, you know, you actually had brought up one thing in particular that I wanted to address as well with in regards to the grid. You know, unfortunately, me and my husband lost power. Thankfully, it was only for like a short period. I would say probably like 2 hours, and it came back on. But we saw 2 calls to conserve that was put out by ERCOT, you know, and we in particular know that the state of Texas, our population here has grown substantially, way more than we had projected previously. And just recently also heard that it's even going to grow even larger, in particular in the metropolitan areas. And so the fact that we, even in this situation, knowing going into that it was going to be a need for high consumption of electricity, you know, during this, obviously this weather period that we're in right now, and that we should expect it anyways, as the state of Texas, the type of weather that we have here in the state, either it's god awful hot or we're trying to stay alive, you know, in the freezing cold temperatures. You know, this isn't a situation where we should even be in situations where we're calling on Texans to conserve energy. We need to make sure that our infrastructure here in the state of Texas is fixed now. And we need to continue to improve on our already infrastructure that we have. But more than anything, we need to stop waiting until the situation of where we are finally have our population to where it's going to be, and then having to deal with the grid issues at that point. So if we're right now in this situation where we're asking Texans to conserve energy, imagine where we're going to be at whenever we have even more people in Texas also needing to use that energy as well. And so, you know, in particular, whenever we've seen those spikes, we've seen in particular green energy has really stepped up, you know, whenever that has happened. And so us in also understanding that oil and gas, we are an oil and gas state, you know, that's not going to change anytime soon. It's something that we just, you know, we understand that happens. I grew up in the Panhandle before I moved here to North Texas. And I can tell you, I have a lot of family members who work out on the oil fields and are, you know, transport oil, you know, to different areas from the Midland, Odessa areas. And I can tell you, making sure that we keep that in mind of what the current state of Texas is, but also moving towards and embracing green energy. We have to do that because, like I said, it's been green energy that very often has been the saving grace here. And in the past couple instances, where consumption got incredibly high and we needed that extra. And I know just recently I had read as well that we've got, you know, the grid connection that we're bypassing as far as being able to actually be under federal regulation through Louisiana. We know that we got to connect to the national grid. I understand the fact that a lot of people in Texas feel that we want to be, you know, separate from being, you know, dictated to from the federal government. But understanding that not only would we benefit from these instances of being able to get energy from the national grid, but the state of Texas as an oil and gas state is also able to profit off providing energy to other states that need it as well. And so, you know, those are things that obviously we need to move towards and make sure that we prepare for in the future. Like I said, one of my biggest complaints is that very often us as individuals always think about the issues that are in front of us right now, but we're never gauging for the 5, the 10, the future. And we got to move more towards that mindset.
Okay. So Alex, as somebody that has already been in the House before, who has been around the chaos, you know, and you've probably seen firsthand the influence that big oil and energy has on Texas and how we make laws. So from that perspective, like, what do you think can be done in the House that maybe could even get bipartisan agreement to, you know, as far as not only mitigating further climate disasters, but making sure our grid is secure?
You know, I think there are a couple of things that need to happen. First, there's still a big political stigma around green energy, which is funny because you'd think that it's the oil and gas lobby that's really pushing this. Not necessarily. Chevron, which we all know has a lot of gas stations all over this country, they're the largest producer of green energy in the state of Texas. They smartly got on the bandwagon early. They own a bunch of windmills, and West Texas is full of them. I mean, if you take a drive out there, you'll see there are just hundreds and hundreds of windmills everywhere. They realize that, but they normally don't lobby in the state of Texas hard to include their energy onto the grid. And if you saw this last constitutional election, you saw that green energy production was not included in the incentives. And the reason why is I think it's partly landowners, partly is this belief in freedom that in Texas, if you don't have your pickup truck full of gas and it's unleaded and it's you know, you got to be able to drive everywhere, and you know, it's that kind of sense of identity, this nostalgia for cowboyism and big pickup trucks and diesel engines. That's the mindset we need to change here. And I think the way that the pro-environmental groups lobby, they never address that part of the reason why Texas really pushes gas and gas stoves and the only way to create energy is through a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas plant. Is this mistaken belief of what Texas is. People don't know that Texas is a huge green energy producer. They don't know that our universities research other ways to create energy, whether it's geothermal or fission reaction. These are things that we should be promoting in Texas so that we can safely let our Republican colleagues know that it's okay to think of other forms of energy other than natural gas and coal. I think once we change that mindset and let the normal person realize, hey, this is okay. I really don't care if my house gets powered by a windmill or a coal-powered power plant. That's the first step that we get to letting them accept that green energy is reliable, it is consistent, and hopefully at some point it'll become cheap enough that people prefer it because the pocketbook still matters. And different companies are very, very smart about campaigning to get those clients to sign up for their utility policies, their utility contracts. And sometimes at the end of the day, that's what matters to people. You know, they see the cost of entry into electric vehicles, such as a Tesla. Even though the tax incentives are there, they still may not qualify for it. They still may not be able to get it. So they'll stick with what's tried and true, you know, fuel injected pickups. So That's the mindset that we got to change. We do that, we can change Texas. We change Texas, we can change the entire country.
Yeah, wow, that's great, and I absolutely agree with that. And I'm really surprised to learn that Chevron owns windmills. So, maybe we should get no more lobbyists.
You know,
I was gonna say get more Chevron lobbyists, lobby for windmills, but no more lobbyists.
you forget these same companies have reciprocal offices in Europe. Europe is way ahead of us on renewable energy. And those companies know. Germany is going all electric now. They realize the only place they're building gas BMWs is the United States and Mexico. In Europe, they're all electric. So sometimes we got to follow it so that we can lead.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Okay, so Teresa, and I mentioned this last week on my podcast, and I'm going to mention it again today. Texas Republicans Jody Arrington and August Pfluger did a death march in Congress for the lesser prairie chicken, which is still like the funniest thing in the world to me. But they did this because of the oil and gas initiatives that Biden had passed through executive order to save this species, which is endangered, which was going to interfere with the Permian Basin drilling. Aside from the endangered species, Biden has taken a, I would say, aggressive approach to climate change and to protecting endangered species. What are your thoughts about that, Teresa? And what do you think that Congress should be doing to lessen the impacts of climate weather?
Yes, I want to follow up some of what Cassandra and Alex brought up. But first, I want to say that Mother Nature doesn't care if you have an R or a D after your name. This should not be a political issue, in my opinion. Extreme weather events, as we know, are increasing in frequency and severity, and we need politicians to have, or our representatives to have, serious conversations around that. I believe that we can pass some incentives, which Alex touched on, the money part of it, to extend tax credits for solar, for wind, for hydrogen production, and for energy storage. And one thing nobody talked about is water. We're seeing across the state of Texas that this is going to be a big crisis coming up. We look at our lake levels. We look at, I know in Blanco County that they're having to boil water again. A neighborhood in South Austin and Hayes County is having to also boil water. And in the last, I believe it's 5 years, I've had to boil water 3 times. We have the immense knowledge and capability in the United States to solve these challenges. It's just we need to have serious people who are willing to address that and create incentives, like I said, to constituents, but also give funding to the National Science Foundation to advance technology to help with these situations. I understand the concern that many people in Texas have in the in various fields of employment. The way I liken it is, if anybody has driven a stick shift, when you're coming off the clutch and pushing on the gas, you have to do it in a good fashion, smoothly, or else the car will stall. We can't stall the Texas economy by completely getting off of oil and gas with sustainable energy, but there's no reason why we cannot increase the speed of that transition. And I think that one thing the federal government can do is provide incentives to people to learn other jobs if they are in one of the fields that is slowly going away, and job training, of course, but also have right of first refusal for those jobs to the people who are moving from one industry to the other. So that helps some sense of security for people who have fear around the transition. You also touched on, Alex, in Europe, You know, this is a national security issue. If we don't ramp up our infrastructure around these sustainable technologies, then we're going to get left behind. So that's also, we can, you know, manufacturing could increase in Texas to help Texans. And there's really no reason why we can't do those things. And it would also help stabilize our democracy, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, and I agree with your opinion, and I can see your argument for it. So yeah, I mean, I think that you guys all have some really good ideas. I am really impressed to know that Chevron has windmills. I'm not going to get off of that. But I do want to talk about another thing. So we do have a primary election coming up. All three of you have primary contenders. The primary election date is
March 5th.
March 5th. Okay, so March 5th, the early voting starts like 2 weeks before that. We are facing a time in Texas and really in America where democracy is on the line, and we're seeing Republicans go after everything that we hold sacred, our bodily autonomy, our, you know, children's right to health care, and voting rights, particularly and especially in Texas, voting rights. Teresa, let's start with you this time. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act has been on the table for a couple years now. It hasn't passed in Congress yet. I think that if it does, it will solve all of our problems in Texas, well, at least our voting problems.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, you know, seeing that we may or may not have the numbers to pass it in the next Congress, what else do you think could be done, you know, maybe even by like a piecemeal fashion to protect voting rights for people in Texas?
Yeah. As many people will say, Texas is not red or blue. It's a non-voting state, as we know. We have organizations and I support them, some actively, some a little bit more on the sidelines, for increasing voter turnout and reaching out to people. I'm a VDR here in Travis County, and I'm going to finish getting VDR training in Bastrop and also Brazos, which is 3 of the 13 counties that I'm running in. I think a big part of it is making the connection of why it's so important to vote. It's your voice. For young people, it's understanding that without using that voice, they are keeping themselves essentially in some sort of parental situation as they're trying to become adults. They're actually not, they're losing their voice. They're losing their way of speaking up, essentially, but also making the connection that if you don't vote, you're going to lose your ability to say, you know, healthcare wise, what are my choices? And I have some personal experience in this. My mother was born in Haiti, and her father was Haitian, her mother was American. And I never knew my grandfather because he was killed by a dictator in Haiti. People stopped using their right to vote there. And so it's become a situation that is, you know, we're going down that path if we're not careful. So connecting to personal, what's out there in the world would be helpful. So voting, understanding the what you're voting on, and making that connection to younger people would be very helpful, I believe. So, yeah.
Okay. And so Alex, you missed it last year when Carrie Isaac, who is the wife of Jason Isaac, who I believe you were in the House with at one time, Carrie Isaac introduced a bill to ban voting on college campuses. It luckily did not pass, but we should expect to see some repeat legislation this coming year. what do you think should be done if Democrats were to take the House to immediately change the way that we vote here in Texas?
You know, during COVID, if you remember for the general election, Governor Abbott extended early voting to 3 weeks.
Mhm.
They had a lot more people come and vote. Harris County did something very innovative because they realized that many people work different shifts, different hours, or they have family commitments. It's harder for them to leave their home to go out and vote because Houston is not an easy city to get around in. It's complicated. The streets are always under construction, it seems. And Harris County came up with these drive-through voting locations where people didn't have to get out of their car. They could just pull through basically warehouses. They're all secure. And more people voted.
Mhm.
Did we lose them?
Oh, no,
Alex,
I think he froze.
we
some.
we lost your sound, Alex.
I think he completely froze.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's see if he comes back and we'll move on to Cass.
Great.
And so voting rights in Texas, what do we have to do?
Well, I feel like anytime we talk about voting rights in Texas, we got to start with 2021, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
That was whenever all of those laws ended up passing. And we know that that came from essentially all of the, you know, the conspiracy theories and everything from the 2020 election, right? And so I can say, as somebody who obviously was, you know, block walking at that time and knocking on doors, the amount of, in particular, and even now, knocking on doors now on people who were vote by mail, encountering them at the doors, who first time around, you know, in 2021 was a situation where we were having to educate people at the door about how they needed to include both their social security number and their driver's license number, because, you know, if you didn't put the right one in there, it was going to get rejected. And, you know, I would say more than anything, we knew exactly that that was going to happen. I know Alex isn't currently on, but I'm sure that he could talk about the fact that, in particular, Democrats held the line and said specifically that exactly what was going to happen, and it exactly happened the way they said it was going to happen in 2021, right? And so that's exactly what we saw. We saw people's mail-in ballots get rejected. It was incredibly chaotic during that election, having to educate people. And now we see the vote by mail individuals that we're getting at the door now. Guess what? They don't even want to vote by mail anymore because they do not trust the system. They're so afraid that their vote is not going to be counted, that they are literally, even some of these folks who they shouldn't have to feel that way. No one should have to feel that way. They are literally going to vote in person because they don't trust that it's going to count when it goes through the mail. And that is so unfortunate. And just like Alex was saying, as Democrats going into the Texas ledge, you know, making sure that we roll back once we get that majority, because let's be real, as Democrats, we don't make up the majority in the state house.
Yeah.
But once we are able to do that, we have to roll back the level of disenfranchised voters that they have done, and making it harder for us to be able to vote. And we need to institute new voting laws that make it easier to vote. Like, just like Alex was saying, you know, making sure that we do drive-through voting, making it easier for people to be able to vote. I mean, just in general. There are counties here in the state of Texas, here in Dallas County, we can vote at any poll location. You know, we don't have to vote in our precinct, but there are other counties in the state of Texas that they do not allow that. And we should allow that across the board all over the state, because just like you were saying, Michelle, people have different experiences, work in different areas of where they live. And so being able to have the accessibility of hours that are more accommodating and more locations to be able to vote at, I mean, I feel like at least at the bare minimum, we should be striving for those type of things.
Yeah.
More than anything. And so in addition to that, doing a lot of work that I've done with grassroots organizations, individuals who are in jail, who have not yet lost their right to be able to vote, should have poll locations in jails to be able to cast their vote, because that is their right. For individuals who are incarcerated that get out and fulfill their obligations and are now able to cast their ballot because they are now re-eligible, should be re-registered and allowed to vote. We don't do enough of a good job of making sure to educate people when they're able to. We saw a young woman here in Fort Worth who got criminally prosecuted because she didn't understand that she technically was not eligible to vote. And we need to do a better job of doing that. When people go and they do their time and they reacclimate back to society, they have the right to have restoration of their vote and for their vote to count. So, all of those things are things that we obviously need to fix. We need to work towards and making sure that we improve and make it more accessible for people to be able to vote.
Absolutely. And I think that you really touched on it when, you're talking about people didn't know the processes for mail-in voting. And I just was in an argument with a SREC member in the Republican Party like a week or two ago, who was saying, oh, if you have countywide polling places, it increases, voter fraud. And I'm like, how does it increase voter fraud? It's something they hear and they run with it. Alex is back. I'm glad you made it back.
Speaking of power grids and voting rights, I think the Illuminati knew where I was going with my next comments and shut us down briefly. Well, what I was getting at was, with the successes that Harris County had in increasing voter turnout at a time when it was very hard for most Americans to vote because they were being innovative, the response wasn't one to celebrate them, but the Republican Party took measures to change the laws to prohibit those accommodations. And these are all accommodations that Harris County was willing to pay for with their own budget. It wasn't affecting anybody. They had the money to do it, and they thought this would be a worthwhile thing to do, to preserve democracy and letting people have their right to speak at the polls. I think we need to be strong about that and being specific when we're talking about voter rights that are being taken away and why we need to increase voter turnout. And I think my colleagues on the panel will also agree with me that we need to do a better job as Democrats and not just getting people registered to vote, but bugging them to come out and actually vote. I want to say in Texas, there are more registered Democrats than Republicans, but this is largely seen as a red state because the Republicans turn out.
Alex, I mentioned something on that topic, and that is, if we make a connection to how their vote matters and how it affects them personally, then that would help.
You're absolutely right.
Neither one of us talked about gerrymandering.
Oh,
so
gosh.
That would be something that needs to be addressed. It should be citizens who on committees who do that. My district, I don't know about y'all's, looks like the anglerfish from Finding Nemo, just so you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. My district, when it was redrawn, broke a state rule. It's called the two county rule. And they draw these districts, as you know, to increase the likelihood of more Republicans being elected or to compact the urban centers to really focus and limit the suburban influence of Democrats.
Yep.
What we need to do is, one, not give up, because when we start to become frustrated with that, it discourages our constituents. And we need to remind them, even if you live in a red district of any type, you still need to come out and vote. We know our numbers are increasing. And I tell you what, all these pro-life, anti-abortion policies just does one thing. It's going to start creating more babies. And once we start educating those babies that, hey, you know what? Guess who's always trying to eliminate your rights? We're going to end up with a lot more Democrats long term. That's the plan. They can try to slow us down, but we think that we're in the right and we are going to grow and impact. But we can't let up. It's on us as nominees when we're up there in November, whether you have a contested general or not, increase the vote, get it up there. I think if people saw that Biden does even better this year than he did 4 years ago, people will be encouraged. There will be more investment in this state in getting the vote out. And eventually, people like Governor Abbott are going to lose.
Yes, please, please let him move. Texas is going to be blue by 2030. Mark my words, I said it. You can hold me to it. Will it be blue in 2024? Well, we'll see. I definitely believe that 37 is going to flip. I believe that 115 is going to stay blue. And Teresa, I think you have a really good chance as well. So we'll see. It's just a matter of getting them out to vote. We're almost out of time, so let's just go ahead and everybody just do kind of like a wrap up, just 1 or 2 minutes. Let's start with Teresa.
Oh, of course you would start with me. I'm just really amped up for this election. I think that the environment is different, especially after the attacks on education and the attacks on women. I believe that, like everybody has been saying, if we work together to get out the vote and make the connection of why the vote is so important to everybody in their personal lives, that it will bring them out. And I think they are already seeing that and what they've been through over the last few years. So I look forward to seeing you all on the trail and working together to make this happen.
Okay, perfect. Cassandra.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on, Michelle, and such a pleasure meeting both you, Alex and Teresa. I wish you all the best on the campaign trail. More than anything, I think what's so important is that we make sure as candidates to continue to put our best foot forward and be hyper-focused on the message that we put out to our, hopefully our future constituents, and making sure that they know that there's hope here in the state of Texas, because I'm sure both of y'all have been block walking just like I have. And I've been getting a lot of doors of people who feel really just disheartened with where our state has headed. And I understand, because I tell them that's why I'm here knocking on your door, is because I am equally disheartened. And I know what Texas can be, and I know that it will be there whenever people like us get elected. But we have to do the work, and we can't give up. And every day we got to wake up and say it's a brand new day, and I got to give it my 200% again, because like I tell people, we are in literally the fight for our lives, for our reproductive rights, for our public education, for our future generation, for our voting rights, for people who look like me to be able to feel like we're accepted and not being targeted based off the color of our skin. I want to make sure that we fight for a Texas that is inclusive and opening and welcoming and loving, because that is the Texas that I believe is the Texas I live in. We just got to make sure that we are the loudest voices and drown out the ones that have been spreading the hate and the division. So I look forward to, following both of you. And once again, Michelle, thank you so much for having me on. I wish everybody the best of luck.
Okay. And Alex.
I've been in the House where we're there until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, fighting combat, essentially trying to preserve the most basic rights that we've had. We've had those nights where we just got our teeth kicked in because we were outnumbered. And it would be easy for me just to say, you know what, I'm going to sit this out. I'm going to spend more time with my family. I'm going to keep my own money since I'm self-funding this race for the most part. But I'm saying, no, I am not going to let somebody else make bad decisions, not just for my community, but for Texas as a whole. We have got to pick ourselves up, like they say, from our bootstraps, which is actually very physically hard to do if you've ever tried to do that. And we got to go out there and show them we got the fight, that we're not going to quit. We are not quitters. We're going to take back not just our rights, but our bodies and our thoughts and our ideas. It is what it is, and we're Texans. Whether you're born male and you decide that's not who you are, identify who you are. You're a Texan first. You can decide the rest. And more importantly, We need to take back all our icons in this state. You know what? You want my voting rights? You want my genitals? You want my organs? You want my identity? Come and take it. I dare you. We've got to show that we've got the fight too. We do that, we can make this state purple first and then blue long lasting. We can do this. And it's up to us to be the models, to show people that it can be done. And we need to support people in other districts, not just our own communities, even if it's just a message of support. Say, hey, we got this. We're all in this together. I look forward to seeing both of you guys in a capital seat at some point, whether it's in Texas or in DC. I look forward to serving with you both. Thanks so much. And thank you for having all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, you guys. Okay, so everybody remember March 5th, primary voting. All of these candidates have primary contestants. So let's get out. Make sure you make it to the polls March 5th. Thank you guys so much. And we will
Thank
see
you,
you guys next
Michelle.
Wednesday. Bye.
Michelle. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.